Welcome to my HOA Karen channel. Like, subscribe, and drop your craziest neighbor story in the comments. Imagine walking back into your own home after a long day, ready to relax, only to find that the locks have been changed. You stand there, staring at your door, wondering if you're in the right place. You ring the bell, no one answers. So, you take out your spare key, but it doesn't work. You try again, still nothing. You panic. What is going on? Is this some sick joke? But it's no joke. Behind that door is someone you know, someone who should have never taken that kind of liberty. Someone you've trusted. But now your trust is shattered, and what's worse, they're not leaving. Welcome to the world of entitled people, where boundaries are crossed, trust is broken, and things spiral out of control faster than you can blink. This isn't your run-of-the-mill, entitled behavior we're talking about. This is a story where one person decided they could just waltz in, take over, and act like they own the place, all under the guise of entitlement. And the best part, they didn't even care about the consequences. Let's dive into a wild story that'll have you questioning everything. The house, the locks, and a person so audacious that you'll wonder how they even thought they could get away with it. But here's where it gets crazy. It all started with a simple favor, a simple gesture of trust, a key handed over for emergencies, and suddenly everything turned upside down. And who's at the center of it all? None other than Karen, a name you've probably heard 1,000 times, and believe me, this Karen deserves it. A family member, but not one you'd ever expect this from. You'd think family would be the last ones to pull a stunt like this, but sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who will cross every boundary just to get what they want. What was her reason? Simple. She wanted the house. Her logic? That it was abandoned, that the owner wasn't around anymore. She even went as far as to convince herself that she had every right to do what she did. But here's the kicker. The owner wasn't gone at all. She was just away for a little while, thinking that things were being handled, that everything was fine. But trust me, things couldn't have been farther from fine. Imagine being in that situation. You hand over a spare key to a trusted family member, thinking it's only for emergencies, maybe for something minor, like checking on the place while you're away. But the next time you come back, your family member's living in your home like they've been there forever, and they've changed all the locks. No explanation, no heads up, just a blatant disregard for boundaries. But it doesn't end there. This is just the beginning of a story that'll have you on the edge of your seat. The audacity, the nerve, the total lack of self-awareness. You're about to find out exactly how the story escalates in ways no one could have predicted. So buckle up, because this isn't just another Karen story. It's something much deeper, much more shocking. You're about to get a glimpse into the mind of someone so entitled they didn't think twice before crossing a line that can never be uncrossed. And just when you think it can't get any worse, you'll realize it's only just beginning. Trust me, once you hear the full story, you'll never look at Karen the same way again. This is one you won't want to miss. Stick around, things are about to get a lot more intense. So let's break it down. The story starts innocently enough, right? Mary, the homeowner, had a pretty simple arrangement with her half-sister, Karen. Mary wasn't living in the house full-time. She was staying with her girlfriend, and the house was sort of on the back burner. The house was about to be sold anyway. But still, it's a property that's been in the family, and it should have been a place where Mary could come back to without any drama. She'd been away for a while, but there was a bit of a communication plan in place. Mary trusted Karen enough to leave her a spare key. Just in case. Emergencies. Maintenance, whatever. Simple stuff. It was supposed to be a gesture of trust, nothing more. But that small act of goodwill. Yeah, that's where everything went south. Because trust is one thing, but entitlement, that's a whole different animal. So Mary comes back to the house one day, ready to check in, maybe make sure everything's okay. It wasn't like she was expecting anything weird. After all, she left things in good hands. Or so she thought. But the moment she arrived, it hit her like a ton of bricks. The locks had been changed. Not just one lock, but every single lock on the doors. Can you imagine walking up to your house, thinking you're going to open the door, and the key won't work? That sinking feeling in your stomach when something just doesn't add up? That's the moment everything shifted from unexpected to this is bad. So, of course, Mary rings the doorbell, maybe thinking Karen's inside or maybe someone's there to let her in. But no one answers. She's standing outside, trying to figure out what's going on, when the panic really starts to set in. She checks her phone, hoping to see a text from Karen, something that might explain why the locks are changed. But there's nothing. No explanation, no heads up, just silence. Mary, now beyond confused, decides to try her spare key. It's still a trusted backup, right? But nope, still doesn't work. That's when it hits her. She's locked out of her own house. And the worst part, she can't even figure out why. So what does she do next? Obviously, she's going to call Karen. You'd think Karen would pick up, explain what's going on, and maybe apologize for any confusion. But that's not what happened. When Karen finally picks up, she casually tells Mary that she's been living there now, that the house is abandoned, and that she has every right to be there. Imagine hearing that. Your own half-sister telling you that the house you own is suddenly hers because you weren't living in it. There's no sense of respect, no understanding of boundaries. Just pure entitlement. But it gets worse. Karen, in her infinite wisdom, claims the house was abandoned and that she was just taking care of it. She tells Mary that she wasn't using the property anyway, so it was only fair that Karen make herself at home. So, without asking, without permission, she and her boyfriend, Ken, just moved in. Changed the locks, settled in like they were the owners, and didn't even bother to let Mary know. I know, it sounds wild, right? But that's what makes the situation so unbelievably frustrating. Karen just assumed she had the right to take over a house because Mary wasn't physically there all the time. But here's the thing. There's a huge difference between temporarily staying in a house and flat-out moving in like you own it. Especially when you're doing it without asking, without any respect for the real homeowner. And here's where it goes from bad to worse. It wasn't just some casual mistake. It wasn't even a misunderstanding. No, this was an outright power move, a display of pure entitlement, and Mary wasn't going to stand for it. Not now, not ever. So now you've got Mary standing there, trying to process this mess. She's locked out of her own house, and her own half-sister has taken over without permission. But the situation was about to escalate into something much worse. Mary, understandably upset, calls the police. And when they show up, it gets real. Karen and her boyfriend, Ken, still acting like nothing was wrong, refuse to leave. Karen, of course, is in denial. She genuinely believes she has the right to be there, that the house is hers now because Mary abandoned it. But that's not how it works. You can't just take over someone else's property, no matter how entitled you feel. The police weren't exactly on Karen's side, and after some back and forth, they realized it wasn't just a misunderstanding. The locks had been changed, the house had been occupied, and the whole situation was a mess. Ken, who had clearly been part of this invasion, was arrested for breaking and entering. Yeah, that's right. A full-on crime had taken place here. And Karen? Well, her situation wasn't much better. Here's where it gets even crazier. Ken wasn't the only one in trouble. Karen had her own set of problems. You see, she wasn't exactly in the country legally, and her passport had expired. So, when the authorities ran her information, it didn't take long for them to figure out that she wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. That's when things really hit the fan. Karen wasn't just dealing with an eviction. She was now facing legal charges for being in the country illegally. But the best part, Karen had the audacity to try and claim that she was pregnant with Mary's baby. She told her lawyer that she was actually acting as a surrogate for Mary, which was not only a lie, but it was an attempt to manipulate the situation further. Can you imagine? The nerve it must take to lie like that and try to pull off such an outrageous claim. Mary, of course, didn't let that go. She made it clear that Karen's attempt at a surrogacy scam wasn't going to fly. No, this wasn't going to be one of those situations where Karen could talk her way out of everything. Mary knew better than to let her half-sister twist the truth to suit her agenda. And thankfully, that plan fell apart pretty quickly. By now, it was clear to everyone involved that Karen had no business in the house, no claim to it whatsoever. The police, the authorities, even the family, everyone knew this was just a desperate, entitled attempt to take over someone else's life. But the saga didn't end there. Mary and her girlfriend, who had been keeping their distance, realized that the best thing to do was cut all ties with Karen completely. They weren't going to let her get away with this kind of behavior. And the fallout, well, it was swift. The family was done with Karen. No one in the extended family wanted anything to do with her after seeing how far she was willing to go to take advantage of others. They weren't going to stand by and let this continue. Karen was offered a one-way ticket back to her home country. And that was that. The best part? With all that drama out of the way, Mary and her girlfriend were finally able to breathe again. They could focus on their future without constantly looking over their shoulders, wondering when Karen would strike again. It was over. For good. This whole mess shows just how far entitlement can go, and how some people are willing to break all the rules, even family bonds, just to get what they want. But in the end, no matter how hard someone tries to take advantage, karma always catches up. Karen's story, it's a reminder that actions have consequences, and eventually the truth comes out. As the dust settled, it was clear that the damage had been done, but not in the way Karen had hoped. The consequences of her actions were now in full motion, and while she thought she could walk away unscathed, the reality was much harsher. For Mary and her girlfriend, the relief was palpable. They finally had the space to rebuild their lives, free from the toxicity Karen had brought into their world. Their decision to cut ties with her was no longer just a choice, it was a necessity. Trust had been shattered in ways that couldn't be repaired. The invasion of their home was one thing, but the audacity with which Karen had tried to manipulate the entire situation was another. But let's take a step back for a second. This entire saga started with a simple gesture, a spare key. A moment of trust, a tiny favor, that spiraled into a full-blown nightmare. Mary never imagined that handing over that key to Karen, even with good intentions, would lead to something this drastic. It's crazy to think how quickly things can turn when someone decides to take advantage of a situation. At the heart of it all, this wasn't just about the house. It was about respect, boundaries, and knowing where the line is drawn. Karen crossed that line, and she crossed it hard. But the truth is, she wasn't the only one who suffered from this. The entire family felt the ripples of her actions. Mary, who had always tried to keep things civil, was now left trying to make sense of how things had gone so far south. And her family? They had to deal with the fallout of Karen's blatant disregard for everyone else's space and property. It was almost like watching a bad movie where the antagonist keeps making worse decisions until they finally hit rock bottom. Except, in real life, these kinds of actions have real consequences. And Karen learned that the hard way. While she thought she could manipulate and control the situation to her advantage, all she really did was expose herself for who she really was, a person with no respect for others, no understanding of boundaries, and no remorse for the damage she caused. In the end, Mary got her house back. But the cost wasn't just a few broken locks. It was the price of dealing with someone who was willing to tear down every relationship, every rule, and every sense of trust in order to get what they wanted. And while Karen thought she could escape with no consequences, she quickly learned that entitlement only takes you so far before reality comes crashing down. Mary, her girlfriend, and the rest of the family could now focus on healing from the mess that Karen had left behind. But even with everything that had happened, the one thing that remained clear was that you should never underestimate the lengths some people will go to when they feel entitled to something that isn't theirs. And sometimes, no matter how hard you try to make things right, you're better off walking away and cutting ties before things get worse. The story of Karen's arrest is a powerful reminder that in the end, people who believe they can take what's not theirs always face the consequences, no matter how far they think they can push the limits. And there you have it, Karen's wild ride from entitlement to arrest and everything in between. It's a story that reminds us all how important it is to respect boundaries and never take what isn't ours. It's easy to assume that people will just let things slide, but trust me, karma has a way of catching up with people who think they can walk all over others. Mary's story is one of resilience, standing up for what's right, and learning when to walk away from toxic relationships. She's now free to focus on her future without worrying about someone invading her space. And Karen? Well, let's just say she learned the hard way that no one is above the law or common decency. So, if you've ever had a Karen moment in your life, or you know someone who's pushed your boundaries, remember, sometimes the best thing you can do is cut ties and move forward. No one deserves to have their trust betrayed, especially by someone they thought was family. If you enjoyed this wild ride of a story, hit that like button and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe for more crazy stories like this one. Drop your thoughts in the comments, Ever had a run-in with an entitled person like Karen? We'd love to hear your stories. Thanks for watching, and remember to always stand your ground.